Hi there, maybe you have the Poly Studio X and you want to boot it into the native Teams mode and you're wondering how you get it on the latest software. So this is the Studio X right here, and this is the TC8 touch control. And this one is in Teams mode already, but let me go ahead and share my screen to show you kind of best practices for how you manage the software version. So when it comes to using it in Teams mode, you want to make sure that software updates are all coming from the Microsoft Teams admin console. So you don't necessarily want to be managing the software versions from the web interface of the device from Poly servers. So let's take a look here. So first of all, just check, make sure it's in Teams mode. So you can go under provider mode. And this is where you select different modes like Zoom Room mode or Teams mode. So it's already in Teams mode. And then if you go to device management, this is where you see by default, it's going to pull new software from the Polycom support site. And this button is typically checked for enable automatic updates. So you want to turn that off because you don't want to manage software updates from here. You want to do it from the Microsoft Teams admin console. So I'll uncheck that box and see where it says download update from. So I'll switch that to Microsoft. And then, so that's all you need to do on the Poly side. Now, to manage the software versions, I mentioned you want to do that on the Teams admin console. So this is Microsoft's tool. If you have Office 365, then you have access to the Teams admin console. So if I go to Teams devices, you'll see everything like Teams phones, Surface Hubs, Windows Teams Room systems, and then Android Teams Room systems. So that's what we're talking about right now, would be the Studio X, which is an Android bar. Now, why do you want to use the Teams admin console for software updates? So very important. So Poly releases new software all the time for the Studio X, and some of those features might be for Zoom or other platforms. So not every version that we come out with is run through the Microsoft certification program. So you only want to use versions that are blessed by Microsoft with this tool. So if you use the Teams admin console, that becomes your single source of truth for what is the latest software that's blessed by Microsoft, both the Poly version firmware as well as the Teams app that runs on top. So if I go to Teams Rooms on Android, I see I have two devices here, and let's first take a look one that's already updated. So this Poly X30, it says health status is healthy. So if I click on that and go to health, you'll see that all the different software components are showing up to date. So this one's totally up to date. So you'll see that running a like Teams Room mode on the Studio X, there's several components of software that run on this. So you have the Teams app itself. So this comes from Microsoft. And then the firmware, that's the Poly firmware. So you see all those different versions, and you want to make sure that everything says up to date, and these things have to be in sync. So if you have a certain version of Poly firmware, that syncs up with a particular version of Microsoft Teams app. So everything has to say up to date. So you'll keep updating until everything says that. So yeah, that is the one that's already updated. And you'll see that there's another tab for the touch control itself. So the touch control is our TC8. So that also has to be updated. So you might have to update it there as well. So now we'll take a look at the one that is not updated, which is my Poly Studio X50. It says non-urgent, so I know that one's got at least one of the components is not updated. So if I click on health, I'll see that, okay, it's the firmware in this case, and I happen to know that this is not the latest Teams app either, but it won't show me a new version to choose from until I've updated the firmware. So sometimes you have to update twice, once for the firmware and once for the Teams app, and you might also have to do the Teams app on the touch control itself. So if I click on see available updates, it'll show me any available updates. So this is the actual Poly firmware. So you can see that it's currently on 3.9, which has been the Microsoft blessed version for a while. But Microsoft has recently blessed 3.11. So I see that as the new version. So I can actually schedule that to happen, sometime in the future, or I can just do it on demand, queue it up. So I'll click this button and I will say update. So if I click update, it's going to put that in the queue. So you see up here, it says update preferences have been saved. So that has been submitted. So you can see now that it's queued up and it's doing the software update now, and it can take a while. Sometimes it's right away. Sometimes it might take like 20 minutes for it to start the update. All right, so the software update of the Poly firmware component is done. I can see that behind me. So I'll check back here, Teams Room Android, and it still says, health status, something's up. So I'll click there and click on health. And you see now the Poly firmware is up to date, but now there's a new Teams app that I have to pull down. So you got to update that as well. And you have to update it on the Studio X and on the touch control. So I'll say see available updates. And see, this time it says Teams app rather than Poly firmware. So I'll click that. Once again, I could schedule it, or I'm just going to queue it up right now. So I'll say update. And that's in the queue to update now. All right, so the update just finished. So I now see that the X50 shows that it's healthy. So if I go to health, this is exactly what you want. Everything says up to date. It's got a new Teams app, but got to check the touch control too. So it's easy to miss this. So if you go to touch control, touch console, you'll see that the X50, the touch control piece is still, that needs a Teams update too. So I'll come here and same thing, say update. And you can see the current version and what it's going to, which is going to match the Studio X version. So I'll say update and off it goes in the queue. All right, it looks like it's finished. So I see healthy, healthy. Go to the touch control, it shows healthy as well. And I can look at my device and I'll go to settings. And under settings, I'll go to meetings. And I can see I now have all my new options to turn on Direct Guest Join for one-click join into Zoom. So I just flip that on and we're all good. Thanks.